Welcome to the Beyond Barriers podcast. If you're an ambitious woman who wants to advance in leadership, then this podcast is for you. This podcast is co-hosted by Nikki Barua, digital innovator, serial entrepreneur, author, and speaker, and Monica Marquez, senior corporate leader, ex-Googler, and diversity expert. From inspiring stories to cutting-edge strategies, you'll learn how to develop the skill set, mindset, and tool set to get future-ready fast and accelerate your success. Hi, I'm Monica, your host for today's episode. One of my biggest pet peeves is when a person minimizes someone's success to sheer luck or to being at the right place at the right time. Yes, some luck may be involved, but what's really at the root of their success is preparation. Being prepared to take on an opportunity, even if it's a stretch. Being ready to learn on the fly and confident you can figure it out. Being curious and hungry to continuously improve and do what it takes to get things done. Luck and success happens when preparation meets opportunity. Our guest, Shelley Rosensweig, a partner in the investment management and private equity practice groups at Haynes and Boone in New York, shares her career journey and how being prepared to take advantage of opportunities to learn helped her advance in her career and become a partner at an early age. In her current role, Shelley structures, designs, and organizes U.S. and non-U.S. private investment funds and assists clients with seed capital arrangements, the operation of managed account platforms, and the organization and design of joint ventures, SPVs, and other co-investment structures. Shelley also advises clients with respect to SEC, FINRA, and CFTC regulatory and compliance matters, family office-related matters, trading issues, and employment matters. She further advises clients with respect to distribution and capital raising matters and other strategic initiatives. In this episode, Shelley shares why you should always take advantage of opportunities to learn, the importance of learning business development skills, and shares advice on accelerating success in your career. Visit IamBeyondBarriers.com, where you'll find show notes and links to all the resources in this episode, including the best way to get in touch with Shelley. Welcome, Shelley. Thank you so much for joining us on the Beyond Barriers podcast. We are thrilled to have you on. And let's dive right in. So as I've told you before, our audience really loves to listen about, from women who have been successful and, made a name for themselves in their careers. So tell us a little bit about your story. Who is Shelley? What did you learn along your journey? And just tell us all about that.
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for having me as a guest on your podcast. I am really excited to be here. I am an attorney that's been in practice for over 23 years, and I have primarily worked at 2 law firms throughout the course of those 23 years. My current firm that I've been at for, I think I'm going on my 8th year, is one of the top 100 firms in the country. And my area of specialty is investment management, and that encompasses alternative investment funds, which means that I represent hedge funds and private equity funds and venture capital type of funds and the managers that manage those products. So it's a really specialized area. And I think it's impossible for me to whittle down to just one lesson that I've learned along the way. If I can impart anything that I think is the most beneficial lesson that I have learned, and I think this goes for, it can hold true at any age, but really it holds true when you're younger. It's to absolutely never say no. And just to give you an example of that, when I joined my prior firm, and I was there for a very long time, over 13 years, I joined at a time when the alternative investment fund universe was in its nascent stage, and not a lot of people knew about it or had expertise in the subject matter. But it was explosive, and the firm was hiring hand over foot. They couldn't get enough bodies in the door to help with the work. And I ended up joining with a group of other associates. And the other 2 people who joined me, and was within the span of a month, they had come from bigger firms. I had come from a very tiny boutique firm. And I was very insecure that I didn't have the requisite experience, that I didn't know anything, and that I would have a lot of catching up to do. So when I joined the firm, I made it my mission to learn as much as I could in as short of a time frame as I could so that I could, quote unquote, catch up.
Mm-hmm.
And that led to, on top of all of the work that I was getting right out of the gate, also getting more work from other partners as they would ask if anyone was available to do their projects. I just kept saying yes. I would never say no to anyone. And it's funny because all of that was driven out of this fear that I had to catch up and then move ahead. Mm-hmm. But looking back now, that was kind of silly. It ended up propelling me, but it was silly for me to have that mentality because no one knew one thing about the alternative space. We were all neophytes. Mm-hmm. And it didn't matter if you were a fifth year or a first year or a third year, we were all literally in the same boat. So this concept of never saying no and being overloaded with work, it had two really fantastic ramifications for me. Mm-hmm. One is I became the go-to person that was given work by all of the partners. And along those lines, I learned a lot about subject matters that I didn't know anything about. And it wasn't because I was necessarily the best lawyer out there, but I was the most willing to just jump in and figure out those assignments because I didn't know that I didn't know anything. I didn't have anything to fear. I knew nothing to begin with. So I started at a place where I really had to learn everything. Mm-hmm. And it ended up setting me apart because, of course, all the partners wanted to work with me, as I mentioned.
Right.
But in the end, I became incredibly valuable because I was the person who knew about this esoteric area of the law, or how do you solve this problem in an agreement? I was the person that had done all of this before. Mm-hmm. And that propelled me. It ultimately helped me to make partner at an earlier age because I just became the resident expert in the subject matter.
That's fantastic. And I find it very unique in that you had these limiting beliefs that caused you to say, okay, I'm just going to dive into everything and learn as much as I can so that I can, catch up per se. Right. But the other thing that it helped you do is it helped you bypass that fear where people are like, how am I going to learn this? Or I don't know this. So there's so many people who opt out because they don't know something. And instead you use that as a kind of driver to say, I'm going to just dive in and learn as much as I can, even if I don't know it, so that you can become an expert. The question I have for you, and a lot of, our listeners ask is that, what were some of the habits? Like, how did you consume so much? How did you learn? Was there anything particular that you did so that you could kind of learn all of the, everything that was coming toward you?
I now, looking back, I have this notion and this philosophy that it doesn't matter what you ultimately do in your career. You have to start somewhere.
Right.
And whether you are a lawyer or you're in investment banking, or you go another route, there are still foundational elements that you need to learn in order to be successful in any space that you are in within that particular discipline. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to legal, that's the one I can speak to, you need to learn how to just be a lawyer. You need to learn how to review a contract and spot issues. You need to learn how to use defined terms when you're drafting documents. You need to learn how to review due diligence and come up with and spot the issues in that kind of material. Mm-hmm. And the only way for you to move on and excel in a career is to have those building blocks, to have the foundation. Mm-hmm. So wherever you start, whether it is a job that you have landed and it's your dream job and you're super excited about it, or it's something that you are starting, but it's not necessarily your dream job, but you're there. Mm-hmm. You should take full advantage of learning everything that you can right from the get-go. Mm-hmm. How do I review documents? How do I draft a contract? And try to talk to the people in your group and ask them, what does this mean in a contract? Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and say, I don't really understand what this says. Everyone is afraid to acknowledge that they don't know anything. But that is very silly. I have never put myself in a position where I was afraid to ask those kind of questions because I knew it would only haunt me in the long run. I'd rather ask the question in advance and find out how to do the project in the correct way and understand the implication and what I was doing rather than turn in an assignment to a partner and it's wrong. And now I have to do it all over again. And to boot, they're angry that I wasted all of their time and I have to start again.
Right.
So get it done correctly from the get-go and make sure you understand the project that you're working on. And I can speak to this person. I sat in a meeting one time and the partner that I worked for, he was a brilliant lawyer and he was a really great business developer. But we were sitting in this meeting and it involved a bunch of different disciplines. There was a corporate lawyer, there was an investment management lawyer, there was a tax lawyer, and there was someone else in the room. And we were all talking about this project that needed to be done. And the partners were speaking high level. I was the associate in the room who was going to be drafting the document. Right. And they all got together and spoke a million miles a minute. I took notes furiously. I had no idea what I was even writing.
Right.
And in the end, they said, okay, great. All right, Shelley, draft that. And I looked down at my notes and I thought, I don't understand one thing about this project. I don't even know what they just said. And I decided right then and there, I just had to be courageous and ask the question right on the spot. And don't be afraid to look stupid. So I said, I'm sorry. I know I'm going to take up a few more minutes of your time, but I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do. What am I drafting here? When they had to stop and think about how we would put pen to paper, how were we actually going to draft whatever it was I was drafting, a contract, a letter, whatever it was, when they had to think about what would go down into that paperwork, they realized it didn't really make sense. What they were saying was too high level. And we went back to the drawing board. We spent another 10 or 15 minutes and we actually hashed out what was linearly supposed to go into this document. And it changed the course of my week that I was able to get that information in advance, as opposed to sitting there stressing, sweating it out. What am I doing? I have to hand this in to 4 partners. I don't even know what I'm writing. Doesn't make any sense.
Right.
But the thing that always stuck with me is after that meeting, one of the other partners approached me in the hallway. I didn't work for him. He was in another group. But he was in that meeting and he came up to me and he said, Shelley, I want you to know, I'm really impressed that you spoke up and that you said you didn't understand what this assignment was, because most people do not admit that they don't understand. And then they hand in something that's mediocre because they didn't understand what they were supposed to do to begin with. But you stopped it right there and you made sure that you understood what it was that you were supposed to be doing. And that lesson has stuck with me every day since that time. And on the flip side, now that I'm on the other side, I'm the partner that's giving out assignments. I know when I'm talking to one of my young associates that there's no possible way they can know as much as I know. I've been doing this for 23 years. They've been doing it for 2 to 4. So when they sit there with their eyes glazed over and I'm trying to explain an assignment and maybe I'm not doing a great job, or maybe it's just hard to process that much information in a short period of time, I always say to them, please ask me questions. Tell me what you don't understand about what I just said. There's no expectation that you are supposed to know. You're here to learn. Let me help you. Let's do this in a way that doesn't make me have to review this contract 6 times. I want to review it once, not 6.
That's such tangible advice. I mean, it's so true because I can recall, a couple of times in my career where you are afraid to ask that question. You don't ask that question. And then you spend so much time, you waste so much time fretting over it. You turn in something, like you said, is mediocre. And then you have to revisit it and rehash it and it gets redlined all over again. So that, like you said, you being courageous enough to ask that question and it just taking an additional 10 minutes probably saved you hours of work that would have had, work that would have to be redone.
Hours, without a doubt. And hours of stress.
Absolutely. Hours of stress. Yes. Now, one question I want to ask is, you pursued your law degree. How did you gain that clarity? How did you identify what your career path was going to be, what your strengths were? And then even more so, because I know that, from a limited frame of reference, when I think about lawyers, I probably have a bias or an unconscious bias of, I just see, lawyers in a courtroom. You are a very different lawyer. How did you figure that out? What really led you down your path?
Okay, that's a really great question. I don't think that as a young person, you can possibly know which path you want to take and what will be best for you. You don't know what you don't know. And the only way to know it is to do it. So you have to be in a position where you're willing to just dive into something, whether it is litigation or the transactional side. I'm on the transactional side. I'm never in court. It's just the choice that you have to make. But if I can back up a little bit and give you a really good example of something that happened to me that did actually put me on this career path.
Yes.
When I was in law school, during my first year of law school, you don't specialize when you're in law school, especially in your first year. Right. You're there to just learn about the law, learn how to read statutes, and learn what it means to be a lawyer. You take classes like criminal law, torts, constitutional law. I mean, I don't use constitutional law or criminal law or torts in application of what I do today. I just don't use it. It doesn't have any relevance to me. Right. But you have to get foundational experience and just learn how to read and learn what it means to be a lawyer. So during my first year, I thought, I have a lot of friends that are in investment banking. They are doing more corporate focused jobs. They're in programs. Maybe I should know something about corporate and securities law. That might be something that I am interested in. And that was based in nothing, literally nothing, because I was a psychology major in college. So I hadn't even taken an economics course. I took no business courses, no securities law at that point in time. I just kind of had this, maybe I should try something that I don't know anything about. Maybe I'll like it. And where better to get that experience than at the SEC? So I applied for an internship at the SEC in the New York office. And this predates the internet and emails and cell phones. So I had to actually mail in by regular mail my resume. And I didn't hear anything. And I've always been one of those people that I follow up and I make sure that my resume got to the right person. So I found the person who was in charge of the internship program at the SEC. And somehow, I'm sure after 50 calls, I got him on the line. And we started chatting and he said, Shelley, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but you missed our first round of interviews. We have already done that. We whittled down from hundreds, if not thousands of applicants down to 50. We're in round 2, A. And B, we're not looking for 1 L's. We're looking for 2 L's. So I'm sorry, but you kind of missed the boat here. I don't know what came over me, but I said to him, I am an eager young person. I have this earnestness to learn. I am super excited about the idea of learning about something that I know absolutely nothing about. And how can I ever get a shot unless you give it to me? And it's this vicious cycle. And I feel so defeated in this moment because all I want to do is learn and I don't want to be turned down. And I have this, light inside of me that I really want to learn about the SEC.
Right.
I don't even know where that came from, but I kept this guy on the phone for a good 40 minutes. And he said, I hear you. And I'm sorry that I have to turn you down, but apply next year. Now you know when. Now you know when you have to do it. Right. Keep in touch with me, which I've been planning on doing anyway. And you can apply next year and that'll be fine. I said, thank you so much. Hung up the phone. I still felt so sad. But that was on me. And I didn't even know there was a first round of interviews. Right. But he called me back 4 days later. And he said, come in. You can interview. I've been thinking about you. Wow. And I don't want to turn you down. Yeah. I make no guarantees. We're looking for 2 L's. And we have 50 candidates, and it's only going to be 6 to 10 that we hire for the summer. So, but come in, go ahead, go through the experience. I won't turn you down. You can meet my colleagues and we'll see what happens. I was so excited. I hung up the phone, and then I was terrified because I didn't know anything.
Right.
And I knew that what do you ask typically when you're in, or what do people ask when you're in an interview? They say, tell us about your experience. Tell us why you want to be here. And my experience was off point and zero. I had none. And why I want to be there was just, I was eager and excited and whatever. So I had to figure out a way to show them that I really was excited and that I really did have this earnestness and willingness to learn a new subject matter. So I took out the Wall Street Journal every day until my interviews, and I cut out articles that mentioned the SEC every single day. And then I highlighted them, I underlined them, and I wrote 2 to 4 questions per article. And I brought it in to my interviews. I didn't know how many people I was meeting with. It turns out it was 5, plus the other guys. So 6 in total.
Right.
And every person that I met with, the first thing I did was pull out an article and engage in a conversation. I made them tell me why this was important to the SEC, what they thought about it, what was the impact, what would it mean for me if I were to join? How should I be thinking about it? I just did everything I could to detract from my lack of experience,
right,
and to try to make them see that I was someone they would want to have working in their unit.
Right.
And I don't know what happened, but it did work. And for me, it was a career. That was a game changer and a career changer. Because with the SEC, that under my belt, the experience that I got, plus on my resume, it launched me into these jobs that were more corporate and securities focused. And ultimately, it did get me into the alternative space. So now, what can you do? How can you be that kind of a person? That was luck. I ended up really enjoying that space. But if I didn't like it, I could have done something else, and I would have done the exact same thing. I would have pulled those tricks out of my hat in some other discipline or other field next year. And you can do that. You can make those kind of choices, and they're not mistakes. They're clarity. They're getting you to the place. They're honing you in on the thing that you like or don't like. Maybe it's by process of elimination that you find out what you do like to do.
Right. That's fantastic. And because there was a level of, like you said, you were proactive, you followed up, but then you were able to, in that moment, show your passion. But what I love about your story is you didn't allow the fact that you had no experience, you weren't a right fit, you didn't opt out. You went forward, you shared, your passion and your drive and your story of why you wanted to do it. And that authenticity came through. And I really do believe that's probably why you ended up landing the job, was because of that eagerness. And it didn't matter what you knew or what you didn't know. That's the whole premise of the internship or the entry level job, right? You're there to learn. And I think we forget that. We forget that recruiters and others are really looking for the competencies of the individual to understand, does this person have the competencies and the drive to learn, isn't coming in here thinking like they're a know-it-all kind of thing. Because every company has a different way of doing things, the culture, the way that they do things, the processes. So the biggest superpower is showing people that you are eager to learn and know how to learn. I think that's the important piece. And I love that it comes out so amazingly in your story. Now, another important thing is that you struck a chord. You created kind of like a relationship with this person on the phone. Like you said, you kept them on for, 40 minutes, but you intended to follow up. Talk a little bit about, what is your key? What are the habits and the things that you use in building kind of long lasting relationships, or relationships that are helpful, that you can leverage in the past or in the future? Okay.
That's another good one. So I spent a lot of time learning my craft as an alternatives investment management lawyer. And that's obviously a given if you're going to move up the ranks and be successful within a law firm. And that has application across any field. Doesn't matter where you work. You have to learn that space. You have to become a specialist and really understand and gain knowledge of what it means and how the parts all come together, and how you can see the bigger picture. And you have this, all of a sudden there's clarity. Oh, I get it. I get how this all works together. But once you're moving up a little bit in the ranks and you see that you really enjoy what you're doing and you're getting the experience, the next step, well, I will say the next step for me, and I think it is pretty important for anyone to be thinking about. And I don't think that this is necessarily intuitive. And I'm sorry they don't teach more of these classes when you're in law school or an undergrad. But business development is not something that comes naturally to everyone.
Right.
It's just not. It's a skill. It's a learned skill like anything else. Some people have a natural ability and they can do it better right off the bat. But nonetheless, you still have to learn how to do it. Right. And in my case, once I knew that I really enjoyed this field and I knew I wanted to be a partner in this group, I knew that I had to develop a book of business on my own, because business development is one way that you preserve your future. If you are someone who can bring in and show a propensity to be able to bring in revenues, you're going to be important to that group. You know,
right.
When you are part of the revenue generation as opposed to the cost center, then, you know, you're adding real value to yourself. So how do you do that? Well, I ended up I can tell you what happened with me, and I have some really good tips. And then I can tell you other things that I think people should be thinking about and doing now that I have this clarity. Okay. So I worked at my prior firm, I worked for this partner, and he was the best business developer I've ever seen in my life. He had the gift for it, and he studied really hard. So at an early age, I latched onto him. I would shadow him, and I'd ask him to take me everywhere. And he was willing. He wanted to. He was happy to be a mentor. So he'd bring me to meetings, and I would start out, whether the meeting was for business development, whether it was a meet and greet where we were just meeting other people in our community to see how we could maybe cross-sell to one another, or whether it was an actual client. I always made a point that any meeting I was brought to, I was not there to be wallpaper. So I better say something, which meant I had to be present and think about something in a way that I can add value, even if it turns out I wasn't really adding value. But do that. Start to get comfortable speaking up at these meetings. So every meeting I went to, it never ended with me being silent. I had to say something at every meeting. And some of them were misses and some of them were hits. But over time, they became more hits than misses because I learned how to do it just by experience. Then I sat in this one meeting with him. He asked me if I would join him for one of these meet and greets. So in my field, we have funds, and they have a bunch of different service providers. Service providers can be complementary, or we can be in competition with one another. But for the most part, the service providers in my space, unless they're other lawyers, they're complementary. So we can all try to help each other land clients. So we do a lot of these meetings so that we can all know each other and have one another refer business. Sat in one of these meetings. It was a banking meeting. These people came from an investment bank. I forgot which sector. And then he brought me to the meeting. He was in our office, and we sat down, and the meeting droned on for 50 plus minutes. And he abruptly ended. My partner abruptly ended it. And we walked out. And I thought, this is really weird. This is unlike him. I know that he doesn't want to sit around longer than he has to, but he barely said a word, and that is unlike him. He is always going to sell his message. We walked out. The team from the bank walked to the right. We went left. And the minute we rounded the corner, he stopped me and said, "Do not ever do that in a meeting." And he was yelling at me. And I thought, oh my God, I messed up this meeting. I'm the one. And I said, I will never do that again. What did I do? He said, you didn't do anything. I'm like, well, what did they do? He said, well, tell me what you learned in that meeting from the guy on the other side. He was me, the head guy. Right. He said, I learned that where he went to college. I learned where he got his first job. I learned his last 4 jobs. I know how many children he has. And he stopped me and he said, exactly. He said, when we're in those meetings, you have maximum 5 minutes to sell your story and make your pitch. Lead with it. Do not share your history and your background. That's the last thing you share. The first thing you share is what you can do for the other person and how you can be of help and service to their clients. And that is the purpose of that meeting. We were not at a cocktail hour schmoozing about our families. We were there to relay to one another how we can be helpful to one another. And he never got around to that. And that was absolutely terrible. So he said to me, I don't even know what that meeting was about. I had to walk out of there because whatever message he relayed, it was way too late. It was 40 minutes in and my eyes were already glazed over and I wasn't paying attention. And while I'm happy that he's had a great life, none of that was relevant. So don't ever do that. And I have never done that ever to this day. Right. I lead with my message. And that's really important to understand. When you are trying to develop your brand and your business, lead with the things that you want to leave people with, because that's what they're going to remember. And let them know always how you can help them. Saying how they can help you is very minuscule in terms of importance. But saying how you can help someone else, even if ultimately it's them helping you. And just by way of example, when I sit in these meetings now, and they're telling me that we all want us to refer business to one another. So when they're telling me what they do and I tell them what I do, I always end with, but here's how I can be helpful to you. Let me make you look good. If you have questions that you get asked that you think are more legal in nature and you don't know the answer, call me. I'll tell you how to answer the question, or I'll give you a framework on how to answer the question so that you can look knowledgeable in front of your clients. And it served me so well because people have actually called me. They take me up on that and they ask me, and then it makes them remember me. And you need to find ways to be memorable. The other thing that I think is really important to remember during this journey as you're growing in your career, when you meet people. So if you go to a cocktail hour, this partner that I worked with for all these years, he'd go to a cocktail hour and he'd walk away with 50 business cards, and it would be a stack, an inch thick. And after he'd say to me, I'd look at those cards and I'd be like, well, how do you do? I can't believe you were able to do that. And he said, yeah, okay, so I could do that. I walked around the room, I got 50 cards, but so what? It's what I do with those cards that matters, not that I collected them. Now is the time that the real work happens. Now I have to follow up with them. I have to invite them for lunch. I have to send them literature. I have to make sure that I'm on their radar screen, because as much as it's great for us to know who other people are that we can refer to, it's way more important for them to know who they should be referring to. So let's not let them forget. And follow up is crucial. Always follow up when you're trying to develop a new business. Very important. And I meant to say this earlier, and then I kind of got lost in my stories, but not everyone has such an amazing mentor who can teach them the ins and outs of business development. And that's okay, because you can hire people that can help you with that. When you're young, hiring someone who is a coach, who can help you get on stage, who can help you think about how to present yourself, how to enunciate, how to make eye contact. All of those things are learned skills. And hiring someone when you're younger to make you be better at that at a younger age will make that rote as you get older, so you can focus on other things. You don't have to learn multiple skills at the same time. You can just learn how to maybe interact better when you're at a cocktail hour, as opposed to how do I make eye contact? How do I shake someone's hand? How do I present myself and enunciate and make my voice heard? So those are all tips that I would give to a young person. I think hiring a coach is a great way to get yourself ahead of your peers.
That is such valuable information, because one of the things that we've learned, and research shows it, right? Women don't invest in themselves as much as the men do. In hiring coaches or outsourcing those types of things to learn. And it's so important because it does kind of give you that edge and helps you. And it's sometimes the smallest shift, 2 millimeter shift, that'll take you in a completely different trajectory. That is so important.
What if you could pinpoint the invisible ceilings limiting your success? Imagine having clarity on your strengths and barriers so you can take action and gain unstoppable momentum to advance as a future-ready leader. Well, that's exactly what the Beyond Barriers quiz will help you discover. You'll get your personalized score based on the 25 essential elements proven to accelerate success in the digital age, so you can understand what's holding you back and where to focus your efforts. The Beyond Barriers quiz is completely free and takes just a few minutes. Go to iambeyondbarriers.com/quiz and take the quiz today.
Now, one of the things that you mentioned, and we'll wrap up with this, is, we talked a little bit about relationships, but I think what was so important is that some of your biggest mentors, some of the biggest sponsors you had were men. And we get this question all the time from women where, they're in organizations that might be very male dominated and they're looking for other women to look up to and role model, which is absolutely fair and the right thing to do. But they're missing the opportunity sometimes of, getting mentored by people who don't look like them or think like them. What is your word of advice in terms of how did you strike up mentorships, relationships, sponsorships with people who didn't look like you because you were in an industry that is much more male dominated? And, how did you not allow that to, hold you back?
Yeah. Okay. So when I started out as a lawyer in the alternative space, there were no women. I could not name one woman, one female partner. And I'm sure there were a few, but I didn't know any of them.
They weren't visible.
They weren't visible.
Right.
And they weren't in my group. And quite frankly, not a lot of people were visible in general. It didn't have to just be women, men as well, because it was a new space. And there were only a few people who were kind of pioneers in the space. So it developed over time. And I made the decision that I didn't care who was there to help me. It didn't matter if it was a woman or a man. It didn't matter who it was. I was going to learn from whoever was willing to impart their wisdom. And I would be a willing and able student. And I made myself, even though you're right, I wouldn't have been friends with that partner who was my mentor. Right. We were very, very different. And we weren't even in the same age bracket. Obviously, he was a lot older than me. I was very young. And he had made a name for himself. And I was just there coming up the ranks. But it didn't matter. I still sat with him. I tried to understand him. I befriended all of the partners in my group. And the ones that I connected more with, that I just felt a little bit were more interested in looking out for my well-being, were the people that I ended up focusing on. Okay. But now I think there are so many more opportunities because there are so many more women in what I do. And in general, I mean, in the last 20 years since I started practicing, there are so many more females. And I think it's important that if you are younger, it doesn't have to be a woman that you can go to or a man. If you're a woman, it doesn't have to be a woman. If you're a woman, doesn't have to be a man. It should be someone that you value, who can help you. It doesn't even have to be someone you like that much. Just, it could be someone who knows something that you don't know. And as long as you are, when you present yourself in the right way to someone, when you say to someone, I could really learn from you. You did this really well. I watched you. Can you tell me a little bit about how you did that? Compliments go a long way. And it makes someone really interested in sharing their story. And from my vantage point, after I made partner at my prior firm, and I made partner really young, and I was a neophyte and just trying to make my way, but we had hired a bunch of female associates, which was great. And one of them I was pretty close with, and all of the advice that I had received along the way, I gave to her. And then it was up to her to decide whether she wanted to listen or not. She made partner at a really young age as well. And it's not that my advice was so great, but it's that it worked in this environment. I was right. I happened to be right about some of these points. And it ended up ingratiating both of us into the practice. So my advice would be to find someone. It doesn't even have to be someone who's in your practice area, but just someone who is good at what they do, and try to befriend them and ask them questions and compliment them and tell them what they do they've done well. And how can you translate that? And it goes a long way. And over time, I think you develop relationships naturally with some people, and other people maybe less so. But never forget that you can also learn from other people's failures or from the people's skill set that you don't like. Because I saw a partner he wasn't in my group, but he was in an adjacent group. And I didn't like how he presented himself. I didn't like his style. And people would ask him a question and he would answer something off to the side. And it always annoyed me. And I thought, I don't want to do this. I don't want to be like that. I want to answer the question that is asked.
Right.
Because I'm here for a reason. I'm your fiduciary. I'm your value add. I better be able to answer your questions. And if I don't answer your questions that you are asking me, I'm showing you that I don't really know the subject matter. So you can also learn from the things that you don't think that people are doing very well. And I would encourage anyone to pay attention to all of that.
That's so important. So what you were saying in a nutshell is that you identified who was being successful and trying to understand the traits, the characteristics, the habits, or what they were doing well. And that, definition of success may not look like you. So you've got to learn from that individual what they're doing. And I think the courage to just say, look, this is what success looks like. I'm going to learn from this person who's doing it really well, but being authentic and saying, I could learn so much from you goes a long way. And being able to do that. And I think that's so important and valuable because sometimes, I personally too, sometimes would get into this thing of like, okay, I need to figure this out on my own. And instead, when I did have somebody that would take me under their wing, you accelerate so quickly because you're kind of learning, like you said, they're giving you the rules of the road. They're telling you sometimes the unwritten rules of the road. And the other important thing that you mentioned is that learning from their mistakes. And so they say, don't do this, or learning what not to do because of what they've done. And in some cases, like you said, just observing people in what they're doing where you're like, okay, I don't want to do that. So I think it's so valuable what you've shared. And I think for you, the courage that you've displayed in saying, I'm going to ask the question, even if it makes me look dumb or, it makes me look silly, but it's going to save you so much time on the other side, on the other end. I think that's so important. So that said, any parting words that you want to share with our listeners in terms of, accelerating their success? What words of advice, pearls of wisdom do you want to leave them with?
Okay. Well, for me, I have always been driven by a lot of fear, the fear of failure, the female-centric imposter syndrome.
Yes.
And I've had to really work and spend time to overcome that. And one of the things that I think is incredibly valuable to do when you feel that way, when you feel like you're inadequate or you don't know as much as someone else or you don't know as much as your peers, whether or not it's true, because that's on you. And we always have these limiting beliefs as females that we don't know as much as our peers, but that's based not in 1 ounce of fact, usually. And one way to help yourself overcome that is to do something that you're very afraid of doing. Just jump off the diving board and do it. For me, it ended up being public speaking. I was really terrified to do it. It goes right back to that imposter syndrome. If I speak publicly, then you're going to find me out. But I did it. I knew I had to do it. So a long time ago, I made the decision that I was going to just get out there. And if I failed, I failed. And so what? So be it. But I'm going to do it. And I know that each time I do it, it's going to get a little bit easier. And the results of that, this incredible fear of public speaking that I had was, which I didn't realize until after the fact,
right?
You become, when you're public speaking, you're on stage in front of an audience. The audience can be 10 people or it could be 1,000 people, but you are one person and they're all watching you. So you kind of become an expert. You become the quote unquote celebrity of that environment. And people want to talk to you. So the first speaking engagement that I ever decided to take on was international. I had to fly internationally to a conference.
Wow. Okay.
Yep. It was a big conference. I had actually attended the conference before as a participant, but this year I was going to be a speaker. And I was going to speak about a subject matter that I knew absolutely nothing about. It was an international regulation that had just come out, but it could have potentially impacted my clients. And I thought I might as well learn it right now before it even becomes effective. So I spent 1 full month preparing every single day for this conference. I learned the regulation. I asked myself questions. I did everything I could to be as prepared as possible. I got on that overnight flight. I slept for 0 minutes. I rolled right into the conference. I probably looked like a zombie, but I got on stage terrified and my heart was pounding, but I did it. And I did a good job. And I promptly walked off that stage and slept for the next 17 hours. But the next day, I attended the conference because this was the first thing that happened. It was like the kickoff to the conference.
Right.
So I attended the conference and I noticed how all of these people kept coming over to talk to me. Mm-hmm. And usually in conferences, people do not try to come over and talk to the lawyers. You know, we're not your number one choice for conversation. But I had so many people approach me. And it was all because I was recognizable. They were either asking me about what I had spoken about, or they just wanted to have a conversation with me. I got invited to a few dinners. It made me like a celebrity almost. I was a known entity. Mm-hmm. I realized that as far as building a personal brand,
yes,
and becoming known in your field, that's one way to really capture it because people remember you. You do it once, they know that you did it. You do it again, they remember, oh, I saw her at the last one. And then they want to talk to you. And then you circle a room and people are coming up to you. It's the exact opposite of feeling like you don't know anyone. You have to stick your hand into a conversation and just hope for the best.
Right.
So that I would really say, do something that you're completely fearful of. Take a risk. There's no such thing as an ultimate failure. I mean, really, what are you going to possibly do that's an ultimate failure? Nothing. You're just going to learn from it and it'll make you better, make good decisions at the time, and then move forward.
That's fantastic. And I think your point of how powerful visibility is and how powerful your brand can be, that alone can create opportunities, attracts the opportunity. I think that is so valuable. Shelley, you've been amazing. Your stories have been they've resonated so much. And I know that our listeners are going to really probably enjoy listening to you and wanting to reach out because, the lessons that you've shared are so tangible that I wouldn't put it past anybody wanting to reach out. So in that case, how does someone stay connected with you? Is it LinkedIn? What's the best way for them to reach out to you?
Yeah, LinkedIn is a great way to reach out to me. Checking out my bio on my firm's website and my email is up there. I would be happy to hear from anyone. I'd be delighted to talk to anyone. That's one way that I feel great about passing it along. And I'm pretty visible. So at LinkedIn and any email to my work email would be great. And I'm happy to have a conversation with anyone as well. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thank you again. Yeah. Yes. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
Thank you for listening to the Beyond Barriers podcast. There are thousands of podcasts out there, and we are so grateful that you've chosen to listen to ours. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a rating and tell a friend about it. And subscribe to get new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. Visit IamBeyondBarriers.com, where you'll find show notes, links, and the best way to connect with our guests. See you next episode.